Last week, in the Indian city of Surat, a 40-year-old man named Shilpa Salvi walked into the police station to report an emergency. Inside the Gujarat police station, he told investigators that his 39-year-old wife, a dietitian named Shilpa, had vanished. According to Vishal, no one had seen or heard from her in 4 days. But exactly 48 hours after filing that report, Vishal himself disappeared. The case shifted. Investigators stopped looking for a missing person and began tracking a suspected killer, turning the focus back on the man who had initiated the search. The break in the investigation didn't come from a forensic sweep. It came from Vishal's young son, who found a handwritten note left at the family home. The child handed the paper directly to the authorities, unknowingly delivering the central evidence that would implicate his father. This handwritten letter turned a missing person mystery into a homicide investigation. By documenting the crime in detail, Vishal provided the evidence that would lead police to his victim, regardless of whether he stayed or fled. In the note, Vishal described his resentment toward his wife. He wrote, "Just 3 years into the marriage, my wife began to undergo a change in behavior. After enduring this situation and exercising patience for so many years, I could bear it no longer. I was ultimately driven by desperation." This frustration developed as Shilpa's career accelerated. She held a master's degree in food and nutrition, worked as a dietitian at a local medical institute, and had recently opened her own private clinic. Meanwhile, Vishal had spent years unemployed, following the loss of his job at a local diamond polishing factory. The investigation uncovered a domestic environment defined by suspicion. Vishal grew increasingly volatile over his wife's privacy, specifically her refusal to let him unlock and monitor her mobile phone. The violence was the final outcome of this dynamic. As his own economic standing vanished, Vishal attempted to exert total authority over his wife's life, eventually ending it. The confession insisted on an audience of one. Vishal explicitly stated that nobody else had any knowledge of the crime, writing, "I personally executed every step," and dating the murder to April 20th, 2026. He then provided exact coordinates. He directed investigators to his ancestral home, a locked, corrugated sheet house hidden in the city's poora area. When officers forced their way into the abandoned property, they found a strange anomaly sitting in the middle of the room, a heavy wooden box. This diagram illustrates what they found inside. At the bottom was Shilpa's body, deceased for 5 days. Above her, the killer poured a mid-layer of chemical foam, sealing it beneath a top layer of wet cement, mixed to neutralize the odor of decomposition. There was a stark contradiction in the crime. Vishal had carefully built a scent-proof vault to hide the physical evidence, then immediately wrote a letter that gave the police the exact location and contents of that vault. The moment the authorities opened that box, the missing person report became a homicide case, triggering a citywide manhunt for the husband. Police tracked his movements away from the urban center, eventually locating and detaining him in a remote rural area on the distant outskirts of the city. Shilpa's father, Pradeep Costa, officially filed the first information report, the formal police complaint in India required to initiate criminal proceedings, charging his son-in-law with murder. Vishal's attempt to hide on the outskirts of the city was ultimately ineffective. Because he left a signed confession at the scene, he had already provided the necessary evidence for a murder charge before he even left the city limits. Shilpa Salvi was an educated, highly successful healthcare professional whose life was cut short by a partner who could not reconcile her success with his own unemployment. Left behind are their 2 young sons, aged 13 and 8. The oldest will now have to navigate the reality that he was the one who provided the police with his father's confession. Concrete and chemical foam can hide physical evidence for a time, but the truth of what happened to Shilpa Salvi eventually surfaced, proved by the very words her husband used to try and explain it away.